Well, welcome. Welcome to Northern Kentucky History Hour. My name is Tara Johnson-Nome, and I am Vice President of Behringer-Crawford Museum's Board of Trustees, and I am your host this evening for Northern Kentucky History Hour's 34th episode. We are so thankful for all of you for being with us in this really interesting times. It's been great to be able to learn about Northern Kentucky's history when we haven't been able to get into Behringer-Crawford Museum as frequently or to gather as much as we would have liked. So, so pleased to have you all with us tonight. I said it a little bit earlier, but in case you're just joining us, if you don't mind, please mute your speaker. But we do want you to participate. So make sure you have found where the chat feature is located. And we definitely welcome any questions or any comments that you want to share about the presentation. We also will be having a quiz question at some point in the evening. And so the first person or people with the correct answer will win our prize. And if you're new to History Hour, we have these fancy buttons that say History Hour on them. And so besides bragging rights, you'll get yourself mailed a button. We are not responsible for how long it might take the Postal Service to get that button to you, but really excited to share those with everyone. Also, need to take just a moment and share a few things. First of all, we want to say thank you to the staff of the museum, and thank you to all the other, I see a lot of my fellow trustees for Behringer-Crawford Museum. Thanks to them for their support in this program. And want to say thank you to our financial supporters. Behringer-Crawford Museum is supported by the City of Covington, by Kenton County Fiscal Court, ArtsWave, the Kentucky Arts Council, the Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, and the Carol Ann and Ralph B. Hale Jr. U.S. Bank Foundation. And we're also supported by our members. So for all of you, and I see a number of you tonight here in the audience that are members of the museum, thank you so much. Your support is invaluable to us. And if you're not a museum member yet, we encourage you to join. So also you can do that if you're interested by going to bcmuseum.org. With that, again, just a couple of reminders. Use the chat. Try to win the quiz, and enjoy the presentation. I'm so pleased to be able to introduce you to Travis Brown. He is on the board of the Kenton County Historical Society, and he is also a deputy with Boone County Sheriff's Office. He currently serves as the school resource officer at Ackerman Elementary School in Florence. He retired from the Fort Mitchell Police Department in 2014 after serving with the Kentucky State Police and the Fort Wright Police. He completed his undergraduate studies at the University of Louisville, earning a BA in Police Administration, and in 2015, he earned his Master's of Public Administration at Northern Kentucky University. Also in 2015, he became an adjunct professor at Xavier University School of Criminal Justice. He's involved in preserving local history, and he currently, as I said, serves as an executive board member of the Kenton County Historical Society. Travis, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. What a great turnout. 100 participants.
Yeah, we reached our max.
I would have dressed up. Okay, I have a presentation, and let's get that started. Okay, does everybody see the first one?
That looks great.
Great. Okay. This is going to be my research on the history of the locks and dams in northern Kentucky. And it really goes all the way from the start of the Ohio River all the way to its end, where it meets the Mississippi. And what a story this is. And I really became interested in it because any of you who know me know I ride motorcycle a lot. I ride around rural Boone County quite a bit. And there's this row of houses in Mackville. And I always wondered why this strange row of houses were built right on the river. And I'd heard all kinds of rumors about what these houses were, a women's prison and some other things. Well, it turns out that a lockmaster for a lock and dam lived in that house and operated the Mackville lock, which we'll find out here soon is number 38 on the Ohio River. So I started my research last year, and I finished an article that will be out in the next edition of the Heritage newspaper, the newsletter. So people who came to Kentucky originally, after the natives were here, the way they got here was one of two ways generally. Either they came by wagon, by horse, by foot through the Cumberland Gap, and you can see that picture there. It's a place in the Appalachians where you could actually pass through to get into Kentucky. But a lot more folks started floating down the river to get here. Well, those of you who've lived around here long enough have seen that river go up and seen this river go down. On the left is 1883, and the river level got to 18 inches. And you could walk across it. Well, there's no way you could take a boat down that river, especially not when you got to Louisville. And there's a place down there we'll learn about here soon called the Falls of the Ohio. And then on the other picture, you see the river at its other extreme, where in 1937, the river got up to 79.9 feet in Covington. Well, the river flows a lot in the winter and a little bit in the summer, usually. So the way you got down the river was you used a thing called a flatboat. And in 1792, a guy named Jacob Yoder invented this thing. And he built it himself, and he wanted to take his crops from Brownsville, Pennsylvania, all the way to New Orleans. So he loaded up his boat, and he successfully floated it all the way down there, but found out once he got down there, he had to walk home because the flatboat had no way to propel him and his boat back up river. So what ended up happening is all the flatboats that went to New Orleans were sold for scrap lumber, and that left the pilot to get home on his own in some other way. Now you see two boats in this picture. The one on the left, that's a flatboat. The one on the right was an improved design called a keel boat. And the keel boat had a hole in it that would allow you to pilot it back upriver. And the way they did that was sticking poles in the water or using an oar to propel it against the Mississippi and against the Ohio River currents to get back home again. I'm sure all of you know that the crew of Discovery actually started the journey in Pittsburgh after Meriwether Lewis started getting all the crew together. He took a couple of guys and ordered up a flatboat in Pittsburgh, but when he got there, he found out that it wasn't finished. And it delayed his travels well into the summer, and by then the Ohio River fell too low and he couldn't navigate it down the river. So he had to wait for enough water to come back into the Ohio River to get himself downstream. So when he left in August, he stopped here in Cincinnati for a bit to rest up because they had to fight shallow water and snags and all kinds of things in the river that prevented them from just floating down the river. And as you know, he explored around Big Bone while he was here. And they came back later on and took some artifacts back with them to President Jefferson. But when that boat finally arrived in Louisville, he found there's the falls. But William Clark was waiting for him there over at his brother George's house in Indiana side of the falls. And they hired a guy to pilot them through what you're looking at here. And before the Portland Canal was dug, this is what you had to navigate in Louisville to get down the river. And most folks opted to portage, which means they unloaded their boats and went around the falls and got back in further down the river. Well, the other travel by land was this road, and the national road. It was called, it's still around, I believe it's US 30 now. But once it got through the Appalachians, it ended at Wheeling, Virginia. Of course, we know that's in West Virginia now. But the folks in Pittsburgh thought they were the main city on the Ohio River. And so when the road actually reached Wheeling, they thought, well, we want our business back from the river. But the river was so shallow and so full of snags between Wheeling and Pittsburgh that local business owners started formulating a plan to improve the river channel between Pittsburgh and Wheeling. And they did this with their own money. William Wilkins is our first hero on the river. I said he organized that group that started going out in the river, pulling up snags and improving the channel. And by the end of 1819, they successfully improved that channel so boat traffic could travel from Pittsburgh to Wheeling to meet up with the end of the national road. Later on, Wilkins was so popular, he won a seat in the Pennsylvania State House. And he wanted to continue his efforts on the river, and he actually got the first governmental funds to go into improving the navigational channel on the Ohio River. Although the funding ended in 1825, this was the first time the government actually was involved in improving our Ohio River channel. Some of the appropriations went to surveying problems with going up and down the river. These encumbrances included things called riffles, and that's a shallow area, much like the falls of the Ohio. Other shallow spots with rocks, and the water flowed real turbulently over that, and you could run aground or get sunk. Now, snags are trees that have fallen in the river. And they call these either one of two things: a planter, and that's where the tree roots to the bottom and gets stuck in there. So a big boat coming along hits this thing, it would tear it open and sink the boat. Now, sawyer is a tree that's not rooted as much, and they actually bob in the water. They rise and they fall, and you can't really see them. And so you could run it over if it's pointing downriver, but if it's pointing at you, it could catch your hole and rip you open and go on down. And there's a guy named Magnus Murray, and he was a lawyer. He's a surveyor as well. He founded the University of Pittsburgh, and he was hired to go document all the riffles and snags in the river. And he located 102 of these obstacles between Pittsburgh and Louisville. So the federal government got involved at this time, and you got your first federal funding to improve not just the Ohio, but all the other riverways, including the Mississippi. And then the Army Engineer Corps started doing the surveys and improvements to the river at that point. Instead of having the government design a way to remove these snags, the chief engineer of the Army, General Alexander McComb, he organized a contest, and he offered a $1,000 prize for the best design to remove the snags from the river. And a guy named John Bruce from Vanceburg, Kentucky, came up with a design called the machine boat. The problem with Bruce's boat, although it worked, it relied on physical labor to pull these snags out of the bottom of the river, and that was pretty rough. Well, shortly after that, Henry Shreve, who is so famous on the waterways, Louisiana named Shreveport after him. He designed a much better thing. It was called an Uncle Sam's tooth puller. And that's a picture of it there. And as you could see, there were large booms and mechanical means rather than man's physical labor pulled these snags off the bottom of the river and was able to dispose of them. Unfortunately, these tooth pullers couldn't get up past Louisville because of the same falls. So it was time, and in 1842, the effort started coming around to dig a channel, and it went around the falls instead of trying to go through it. And there's a picture here on the right of what it looks like pretty much today. But we couldn't get enough funding from the locals or the federal government. So what ended up happening is the Kentucky legislature allowed a company to form to dig this thing privately. And so they successfully did it, but they had financial worries and woes. Never could really organize it, and they were collecting fees to go through it. And finally, the federal government just got tired of fooling with these folks, and they bought them out. They had private stock, and the government bought all of it out. And by 1874, the federal government actually took control of the canal and allowed ships to pass through it without any toll whatsoever. Well, the boats improved with time. Flatboats and keel boats are long gone, and now you had paddle wheelers and other larger boats, and you had to deepen the river. So by 1878, the Army engineers determined that the river needed to be 6 feet at all times in its navigational channel. And that means even when you didn't get rain in the summertime during droughts, the river needed to have a 6-foot channel. So there was a design that came from France. It's a wicket dam, and it's called the Chamois model. And the Army engineers built the first one at Davis Island, and that's just south of Pittsburgh. And there's a picture of one there, and as you can see, there's a boat with a boom on it, and what it does is it travels up and down that dam, and it raises wickets, wooden wickets that sit on the bottom of the river most of the time unless they want to raise the pool behind it. This is actually a model of the Mackville Dam in Boone County, and you can see how these things operated. There's a big permanent part over there on the shoreline, and that directed the water towards the middle and the navigational channel. There's a large bear trap, and that raised up, and it took the place of a bunch of wickets. Now you can see in the middle of the river are these individual wooden wickets, and that boat and the men on it had to go in behind each one of the wickets and grab it with a pole off the bottom of the river and pull it into place anytime they wanted to raise up the pool behind it. And to let the boats pass through, there's a lock, and that could be either on the Ohio side or the Kentucky side, or on the Indiana side or on the Kentucky side all the way down the river. Now, that big bear trap there was ingenious. It wasn't raised manually, it was raised by compressed air. And there was one of the houses by the Lockmasters House at each one of these locks and dams had a large air compressor that actually, the line ran under the river, blew into it, and hopefully it raised it. You know, it would get caught up with rocks and debris and trees and mud, but mostly it worked with a little bit of help every year. So now the Slackwater Channel, that's the deep navigational channel that was put into service by these wicket dams. It went all the way to Marietta, Ohio from Pittsburgh, but it had not come to Cincinnati yet. And so the Cincinnati dams started going through their planning around 1902. And Fernbank, if you're familiar with Fernbank Park, over just across the river from Taylorsport in Boone County. That is the location of the first dam in northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area. And there's a reason why they chose that spot. And there was a riffle there, which is, as we know, a very shallow part in the river. And so this was the best place to put it because they needed to build a slackwater channel around this area. And if you go over to Fernbank Park to this day, you will see the Lockmasters House, the air compressing house, and all the other folks that had to live around the dam and work the dam. The houses are still there. So beginning of 1904, the dam construction started, and it did not open until July of 1911. All right, these are the locations of the locks and dams around northern Kentucky. And you can see we had 33, 34, all the way up to 39. And all of these were the wicket construction, and they were nearly identical. All of them looked just like the one at Fern Bank. Now you might ask yourself, well, how come the Licking River doesn't have locks and dams or navigational channel? Well, the Kentucky state government actually looked into improving the Licking. As you can see, in 1836, a man named Sylvester Welch, he was the chief engineer for the Commonwealth. He recommended actually building a lock at 3 Mile Ripple, and that's around where Frederick's Landing is in Campbell County. Of course, it never happened. By 1842, the state decided it was too expensive. The river's very, if you're familiar with the Licking, it will go up, it will go down, it will flood, and the project was abandoned. But that didn't stop folks from actually wanting the river improved all the way to Falmouth. There was actually a small club in 1900 called the Licking River Improvement Club. And they petitioned the federal government to make improvements in the Licking so they could travel by boat from Falmouth to Newport. So the Army engineers surveyed the area in 1900, and Major W.H. Bixby reported to the Secretary of War in 1900 that he does not consider such an improvement being worthy of being undertaken by the United States at the present time. And other than some improvements at the mouth of the river, that's the last time the Licking was considered for navigational improvements. Of course, there's a lake formed further downriver, but as you know, if you try to boat the Licking, you don't get very far south. The River and Harbors Act of 1910 now provided funding to increase the river's channel to 9 feet instead of 6 as the boats kept getting bigger and bigger. And it would flow all 981 miles of the Ohio, would have a navigational channel of at least 9 feet of all times. Now, none of this changes flooding. Flooding is going to happen no matter how many locks and dams you have. As you can see, a flood picked up the Virginia, the steamer that's resting in a cornfield, and it sat it there, and it had to sit until the next flood come along. But interestingly enough, that very boat went into service for Coney Island some years later. And sometimes you had to make repairs to these dams. And if you had to replace wickets or the bear trap or any of these things, you had to let all the water in the pool go away and take the water pool down to almost nothing. So in between 2 dams, if there's repairs being made, you have no water in there, which meant there could be no water in the pool at Cincinnati or anywhere in between 2 dams. All of this brought about the need for a real change and a permanent solution. So the first high lift dam on the Ohio went into service in Montgomery, which is near Pittsburgh. And it used the high lift design. If you can see in the picture, there are gates that can be lifted straight up off the river bottom. to control the pool depth behind it. And when that dam went into service, 3 of the wicket dams behind it went out of service because the pool raised up enough to get rid of those dams, and they were underwater, so they were destroyed. So the modernization effort started really in 1953 through the rest of the river. As you can see here, this is Markland. And this used a whole different design. Instead of being a high lift, it uses a thing called a tainter gate. And it's a semicircular piece of cylinder that rests on a couple of cantilevers and can be raised and lowered into position as needed. And that'll raise the slack water pool behind it. As you can see, the pool behind the dam is quite a bit higher. Because as you know, the Ohio River drops something like 800 feet in its length between Pittsburgh and Cairo, Illinois. And so each time you pass through one of these locks, you actually go down in depth, the boat, or you'll raise up if you're going upriver. So here's our first modern dam, and that's Markland. Markland went in where there was a wicker dam near its location in Markland at that time. And they determined this would be the absolute best place to put the new dam. It started 1956 and went into service around 1959. And the lock went into service in 1964. As you can see part of the tainter gate in position in the bottom of that picture there. Our other dam, Meldahl, they started work on it in April of 1958, and it was completed in 1962 with the lock opening in December of 1964. And it was named for Anthony Meldahl, who was a riverboat captain who spent 50 years piloting numerous boats on the Ohio. Once both of these dams were into place, the pool between the two of them measured 95.3 miles. All of the wicket dams in northern Kentucky were now out of service and destroyed. But believe it or not, these wooden wicket dams built in the 1920s stayed in service on the Ohio until 2018. And the Olmsted Lock and Dam replaced the very last 2 of those. Number 52 and 53 were the last 2 wicket dams on the Ohio. But amazingly, these things stayed in service that long. And these are the remnants of the lock and dam houses that are still here today. So this one is in Silver Grove on Lois Lane. Directly across the river from these houses is Coney Island. That's the Lockmasters House, Fern Bank Park in Ohio. And it's nearly identical to the way it was back in the day. This is Mackville. These are the houses that fascinated me. There's a row of houses that are all similar. It just seems strange to me that these houses would just, well, they had a function. And I didn't know about it until I started doing this research. Fortunately, we have some video of the locks and dams in operation. So let's check this out.
Or the Allied Ashland. This is a view of raising the wickets. The river has fallen where it is necessary to put the dam up. A wicket is approximately 3 feet wide and 14 feet long. Each wicket has to be caught, pulled up, set, and then flipped into position, like that one there. That is the steamer Monongahela being towed back to Pittsburgh after making its last trip. It was one of the last steamboats. This is the Arco. This is one of J.T. Hatfield's coal tows going down the river. That is the E.D. Kenna. These were taken in front of our house. This is one of Mississippi Valley's steam prop towboats. There was 3 of these built, Ohio, Indiana, and Louisiana. This is the Herbert E. Jones from the front of the house. This is a panoramic view of Lock 37 with the dam down. Kentucky shore. This is the steamer Sprague. It was taken to Pittsburgh for the bicentennial and now being returned to Vicksburg, where it was a museum. But since it has burned and is no longer in existence. This is a view in the pilot house. That is Jacksburg waiting with my father. This is the Delta Queen on one of its excursion trips when the water was high. At this time it was owned by Green Line Company. This is a picture looking across the river to where they're cleaning out one of the bear traps. The bear traps fill up with mud over a period of time and have to be cleaned out periodically. Otherwise, they will not go all the way down. They cut a hole in the lower leaf, put a suction hose in there, and then pump out the mud with a steam pump. A diver goes down with a jet hose and works the mud loose and over to the pump. As you can see, it is a dirty gray stinking mud after laying underneath the trap for a number of years. That's Martin Naylor tending the diver, who is now coming up. He can only stay down a short time, as is quite tiresome with the hose down underneath the trap and fighting the powerful hose. This is cleaning off the esplanade as the water goes down. They have this tractor and run around and keep the water stirred up so the mud will not settle as much as bad. After the water goes down so far, then they have to take esplanade. If it dries, it's hard to come up. Here they're taking out the bulkheads in front of the gates, which is supposed to keep out some of the mud from going back into the recess where the gates are left during high water. There were 2 of these put in at the front of the recess. These also have to be hosed off as they are quite muddy. These men are rowing back the maneuvering boats, which is lowering the wickets. The wickets are lowered by pulling them back a short distance to take them out of the catch that they are held up in. A wicket consists of a prop and a horse. There is a concrete sill, which is all the way across the river. Each wicket has their own slide, which the prop slides in. To raise a wicket, is pull back until it goes into a catch, which holds it up. It's a whole lot easier to lower the dam than it is to put it up. All they have to do is pull it back, let it go, and the current will take it down, and it will lay on the bottom of the river. This is looking at the bear traps. There goes another one down. This is the steam dredge boat St. Genevieve.
Okay, that's the gist of it. So you can see in that video that in this picture, you can see the wickets that are standing up in place. And sometimes water would get between those wickets, and they would have to put shims in between each one of those wickets. The lock, this is Fern Bank, by the way. You can see the lock is over on the Ohio shore, which is what you're looking at in this picture. The bear traps and the weir are on the Kentucky side in Taylorsport. That the wickets are in place, and the pool will rise to the north. And the maneuver boat is overshored on that side over there. So this would appear to me to be summer. As you can see, the water level's pretty low, and the wickets are in place for a reason. They want that pool to rise up. Okay, we have discussion.
We do have discussion. We've got a number of questions. That was fascinating. My first question is, where did you find that video?
That video is posted up on, it's actually a YouTube video, and it's under Cincinnati Scapes, I believe it is. I can leave a link for anybody who wants to see that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Home videos taken by the Lockmasters' son. And so that, as far as I can tell, is the last remaining video of any of our operating locks and dams in the area. And it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because I found myself trying to imagine how they would have them go up and down. So it was really helpful to see it in action. It's amazing that they were able to save that video and have it available. We did have someone in the chat ask if you could post that link. So if you could possibly do that, that would be great. The other thing, just to let everybody know, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty tonight. So it's actually live just on my personal page on Facebook, but tomorrow, or maybe even tonight, I'll be able to get it uploaded straight to Behringer-Crawford's Facebook page. So if you want to watch, somebody had asked about recording this, which you can, but you'll just be able to watch the entire thing from Behringer-Crawford's Facebook page anytime you want. So, and then they're always all posted within a couple of days on our YouTube page as well. So just wanted to clarify that, because there were some questions. So Travis, we got a number of questions, so I'm just going to kind of start chronologically. There was a question, you had talked about taking a keel boat, downriver, and then even mentioned, theoretically going upriver, right? If that was possible. And so Frederick Warren was wondering, how long did it take for a keel boat to go upriver?
If you think about, it would take him weeks.
Yeah.
You could either come up the Natchez Trace on foot, or you can try to hire some folks or take your family with you, your farmers, and oar yourself back up against the Mississippi River's current and try to paddle back up. Most folks on the flatboats anyway, they left the flatboat in New Orleans and sold it for scrap. But the keel boat could make it back up, and there's a large oar, and this is much like what Lewis and Clark did. As you know, they had to fight the Missouri all the way from St. Louis into Montana, and they used the boat like that. So they poled it. You stick poles in the water and fought the river. And sometimes it was real hard, sometimes it wasn't so bad. But you have to fight the current with arm strength the whole way. So months.
Wow. I see why maybe somebody might not mind walking back if that was the other option.
Right.
Did have a couple notes that the national road is US 40 today.
40.
So wanted to add in that. Okay, so we've got another question. Also from Mr. Warren, he had heard that the invention of the diesel engine, which in turn led to bigger groups of boats, was the reason that they had to replace all the locks. Is that true?
Like I said, they had to deepen that channel. And you could see even in that video, you still have paddle wheelers, you know, in some of those.
Yeah.
And the Delta Queen actually ran, but as you know, that the paddle wheelers didn't draft that much water. But these larger tugs and the diesels, much heavier, drafted a lot more water. So yeah, that's a big part of it.
And then Amy has a question, just kind of as we talk about that. Can you kind of explain how it works today? Just to kind of reiterate for everybody, like if you were on a boat from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati, Amy's wondering, you know, does someone open the locks for you? I've had the privilege of watching that happen in Greenup County where I grew up, but maybe you can kind of just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and there's no toll, as you know. The waterways are free to navigate for anybody. So you approach it, and the lock master will let you into the lock. Usually you're not going in with the tug or a big barge, because but if you're in a private craft, you can navigate the Ohio in its entire length and going through the lock system.
I saw somebody do that in a canoe one time. It seemed like
they will do that. You can absolutely paddle your way down.
Oh, seems like it'd be a little intimidating. Let's see. Oh, Daniel Shadler and somebody else kind of addressed this for him in the chat, but he was asking about locks on the Kentucky River. You kind of mentioned the licking. And then Sean had said, yeah, there are some, but any other thoughts that you'd like to share about that, Travis?
Well, the Kentucky, again, it's not a navigable river past, I believe Frankfort is about all the further you're going to go on any kind of big boat. Yeah. And there is when I was in the State Police Academy, I got to watch that. Was at the shooting range, and I don't see how you could get a boat up and down it there, but north of there, yes. Back when the river would flow right, you know, in old times, yeah, maybe, but a large boat, tugs, and commercial, no, not so much.
So steep too. Let's see. Oh, Judy provided a fun story along with her request for the link to the video. She said that her mother, living in Sailor Park, Ohio, near the Fern Bank Dam, was reprimanded in the 1930s when she asked why her dress was so dirty, and she replied, "I fell down the damn hill." I just thought that you might like that story. So, but Judy was hoping to see that video again, so we'll try to get that posted. And then if we can't do it right now, we will get it posted to Behringer-Crawford's Facebook page so everybody can get the link to the YouTube. I would like to take a break from questions for just a second, and there's plenty more, to see if you had a quiz question for us. Did you think of one?
I did.
All right, let's ask it, and then we'll give people a couple minutes to reply as we get to the other questions. So everybody get your fingers ready to type.
Where was the last working wicket dam on the Ohio River?
All right, did everybody hear that? Where was the last working wicket dam on the Ohio River? All right, we're gonna let everybody have a second, and then I'm gonna ask a couple more questions. David says, first of all, he says, great presentation. He's fascinated by the history of the management of the river. There were 52 of these locks and dams. Do you know much about the lock houses above and below your study area? Do any of the lock houses have historic designation status, so this important history is protected?
In our area, Fernbank, obviously, it's a park, and it's managed. It's actually turned into a very nice park, and the air compressor room, I believe, is a banquet hall that you can rent out. So it's nice. Now, Mackville, privately owned. In fact, I went over there, and it looked like they turned it into apartments.
Oh, wow.
Silver Grove, or Coney Island at 36, it's for sale right now.
Wow.
So it's in disrepair, but you saw the pictures, but you can own Lockmasters House and property. Up further, I don't believe the one in Maysville's there anymore. I believe that got bought out. I saw an ad when it went up for sale in 1958 or 59. And I think it got bought out by a limestone company or something. I believe it was destroyed. But as far as saving them, there's actually a group that contacted me, and yeah, upriver in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, they've done a really good job of preserving those. In our area, the best example of the preservation is Lock 35, and Thomas More University owns it, and that's their research center. And so that, if you're able to get in there, that's the best example of one that's been preserved.
That is a very cool site. I had a chance to go in there once when they had it open to the public. It was very cool. Hey, how do you pronounce Chilo? Am I saying that right?
Chilo?
Chilo, is that right?
Yep. Chilo, Ohio.
So Blanche was saying that Chilo is a preserved area as well.
Yes, it is. That's true. The lock was on the Chilo, the Ohio side, and it too is a park, and it's in good shape there.
Which leads me to our next question, which is, how do they decide what side of the river the locks are on?
Well, Fernbank's a good example because the river, like I said, went over a riffle. It's called Cullum's Riffle. And when they decided to build there, the engineers saw that that was a shallow spot in the river. And it made it easier to build the lock there because you didn't have to displace a whole lot of water. It was shallow. So the lock went in right there on top of the river. But interestingly, and I didn't put all this in the presentation, but when they were building Fernbank Dam, they started digging in that spot and found the body of a deceased soldier buried there.
Really?
He was never identified, but he was moved to a grave in Spring Grove, I believe. On the other side, in Taylorsport, when they were digging for the weir, they discovered gold. Nobody it was in the sifted out material that was being displaced out of the river, but they found gold on the Kentucky side of the river in Taylorsport. Unfortunately, the sludge was dumped back into the river, so the rest of the gold went on up the river.
Oh man, I've never heard about anybody paying in for gold on the
In
Ohio.
Kentucky, that's right, and there's no explanation for it.
Very interesting. Stephen is wondering if any of the working dams are ever open for tours. Do you know?
I'm not real sure. I should ask my dad. He's on here. He worked for the Army Corps of Engineers. Their website's pretty helpful on that, and I would have to assume yes, but I can't say that for sure.
Okay, well, if he wants to speak up or add into the chat, he is welcome to do so. Okay, we've gotten a lot of answers about your question, which is what was the last working wicket dam on the Ohio, right? So
Correct.
What is the answer?
It's not really by a town, but Olmsted is the one that displaced it. So if you said 53 Olmsted, I would accept that.
All right, we have three correct answers, but David Wicks was first. So congratulations, David. If you want to, you can private message me in the chat and with your address, and you will be the proud owner of a Northern Kentucky History Hour pin. So congrats, and thank you to everybody for playing our quiz. We do appreciate it. Let's get back to the questions. And I know that there was at least one more, but while I'm looking and just making sure we didn't miss anything, tell me what's next for you, Travis. Are you going to continue to do this historic research, maybe on the river or something else?
I did one on the history of the funeral homes in Kentucky. The funeral business, that was an interesting one. And then a couple other interesting folks, but I may stick with some river research because I like what I found.
It's really it's really interesting, and between the video and some of the photos that you were able to share, it's really just kind of brings the history alive, for sure. Let's see here. We've got, oh, and Blanche wants to add that the heritage programs from Cincinnati Museum Center, they actually had a day tour that included the Chilo and Meldahl, but Homeland Security issues have made these, challenging.
That would be my concern right now. Would be that COVID, whatever, probably going to be restricted for some time, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But you can go see the remnants of a few of the ones that are still have the buildings up. Fernbank, I would recommend highly.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks beautiful too. In addition to being so significant, can you talk a little bit about, you had mentioned about flooding. I think about all the snow that's outside right now, and eventually that snow is going to melt, right? And
you're right.
well, I mean, eventually it has to, maybe in July. But you kind of talked about how the lock system really helps with the issues when the river is too shallow.
Right.
Obviously, it's not, completely able to handle when things get too high.
Right.
How does the levee system, I mean, what was the timing of that in coordination with the locks? Were those plans sort of together or separately? Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, you see, the dams were completed years before the lock. So it was more important to keep the pool up. And that's really in summer. But when the river gets really high, it'll go right over the dam. And the wicket dams especially, they just, in the wintertime, all the wickets were put down because it wouldn't have mattered. You don't want those up because the boats would hit the wickets. So they dropped the wickets when the water went up. But it does absolutely nothing to control flooding.
Yeah.
Now the river will raise behind Meldahl or whatever. They can control it somewhat. They can make the pool rise pretty far up. But people and businesses are on both sides. If Meldahl lets the pool get up real high, then Maysville disappears. So there's a balancing act. How much water you let down the river at one time. And they can control it. You think of the Ohio River as a lake. Don't think of it as a river. I know it is a man-made lake. Think of it that way. You have the lock and dam systems control it. You see the water flowing, but it truly is a 981-mile long lake.
Wow, I'm going to think about it a whole new way now. Do you want to talk about the Kenton County Historical Society a little bit before we go?
I would.
Great.
We put out our newsletters. I believe it's quarterly, every 2 months. And we're always looking for new membership. If you're interested in preserving Northern Kentucky's history, Kenton County's history, then please reach out and find us on our website. And we have digital subscription, or we have paper still, or both.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, if no one, let's see, several people are saying that they are learning a lot. So I encourage you to kind of check out the chat. I agree that this was a great presentation and just really, really learned a lot. As we talked about before we let everybody else into the Zoom, I love driving past an old building and kind of trying to figure out what was that. So I love that experience for you led to us learning everything that you were able to share tonight. So really appreciate it. And I hope I got a note here that Paul would like to actually hear more about the funeral home study that you did. His great-great-grandparents started Mittendorf Funeral Home in the 1870s in Covington. So maybe we'll have
They are heavily addressed in the paper. Now that was published in the Kenton County Historical Magazine. So my article, and if you go up to our website, our past issues are available free. You can view them. And I believe that article is now one of the ones you can look up.
Wonderful. Well, okay, we do have another question before we go, and we've got some time. what effects did the 1978 river freezing have on the locks and dams?
There's a lot of ice flow. You have to break that up. There's a lot of pictures of barges breaking free and the ice. The wicked dams were a whole lot worse. But we're not without our problems with the modern dams either. The ice flow it can affect the Tainer gate operation, lock operation. You got to keep the ice flow out of the lock. And when the barge breaks free and lodges itself up against the dam, that has to be brought out. And it's the same with the ice. You have to bring out tugs, break that stuff up. So it can have a really big effect on the operation.
So it sounds like those folks that are operating those are probably very, very busy tonight.
They are. Believe it or not, I believe they do something all the time.
Wow.
And Meldahl actually has a power station, a hydroelectric plant. And if you live in Hamilton, Ohio, your electricity comes from Meldahl Dam.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that.
Yes.
That's interesting. Why do they not have that on all of our local dams? Any thought?
That was a project that Hamilton, Ohio started with the dam. And none of the other dams have the hydroelectric in our area. I'm not sure about the other ones further down.
Yeah. I mean, I know out west that's a big thing, is to have that combination. And then one last question, and then we'll let everybody go. It'll be just an hour. It's kind of a comment / question. Tom says, maybe in your future research, or maybe you already know, the impact that the construction of the dams had on the railroads that ran alongside the river. He says it caused a lot of unstable ground with all the construction,
Absolutely.
which I can imagine.
Well, you think about how high the river got after. There were times when it wasn't controlled, you could get down to 18 inches deep. When
Right.
it flooded, it could get up to 80 feet deep. But when you had a continuous pool of at least 9 feet, now it's at Meldahl, the lowest I've ever seen, it's about 15. The right-of-ways on both sides of the river for the railroads, well, they were definitely right on the water, and yeah, it would erode.
Absolutely. Oh, Tom adds that Markland is a Duke Energy hydroelectric plant. Thank you, Tom.
There is one there, that's correct.
Thank you. Well, great. Well, we are right at 7:30. Thank you so much, Travis, for joining us. And oh my goodness, all of a sudden I'm blanking. Oh yes, next week, I hope you all will come back and we are going to learn about the history of Bellevue, Kentucky. So please join us. We'll talk about this jewel in Campbell County alongside the river. And if you want to learn more, please follow Behringer-Crawford Museum on Facebook or check out bcmuseum.org. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.